Abortion emerges as a hot topic in the U.S. Senate race. Welcome to Columbus on the Record. Abortion rights has always been a key issue in the U.S. Senate race between Sherrod Brown and his Republican challenger Bernie Moreno. But until recently, it has taken a backseat to issues like immigration, the economy, and Moreno's business record. This week, the issue rose to the top when WCMH TV obtained a video of Moreno discussing the abortion issue at a town hall-style meeting last week.
You know, the left has a lot of single-issue voters. Sadly, by the way, there's a lot of suburban women. A lot of suburban women that are like, listen, abortion's it. If I can't have an abortion in this country whenever I want, I will vote for anybody else. Okay, a little crazy, by the way, but especially for women that are like past 50, I'm thinking to myself, that's an issue for you. Oh, thank God my wife didn't hear that one. Oh, they didn't get in trouble.
Later in the week, as first reported by the Dispatch, another recording emerged, this one from March of 2023, in which Moreno said the Founding Fathers would murder supporters of abortion rights. Moreno's campaign says he was just joking at the town meeting, and he was discussing his Christian faith when referencing the Founding Fathers. Julie Carr Smyth, it took a while, but the issue of reproductive rights is now, at least for the moment, kind of front and center in this campaign.
It really is. It has just sort of crystallized here in this, I guess, final 40 days or whatever, as we saw a huge backlash over this on the part of those who support abortion rights in the state. Obviously, we know from last year that's well over half of the electorate. You know, there were news conferences, there were statements coming out, basically people saying a number of things about this statement. One is the idea that it seemed somewhat condescending to some people, but also the idea that it reflects that a voter can't have a regard for an issue that doesn't directly impact them. And so it's really falling hard on Moreno's campaign this week, I would say.
Nikki Haley, Jessie Balmert tweeted out asking if Moreno was trying to lose the election, called it tone deaf. But this goes back to Moreno's shifting position on the abortion issue, who is much more restrictive of abortion when he was running in the primary.
Yeah, he was also someone who was opposed to the abortion rights measure, which Julie mentioned passed by about 57% of the vote last November. And so the comments that my colleague reported on were around that campaign. I think after that loss and losses in other states, Republicans have been more circumspect on this topic. They have not been discussing it in the same way. And so I think that's why the comments of Warren County were so interesting, that, you know, he was speaking to preaching perhaps to the choir in Warren County. That was the county that did oppose this measure, but suburban counties in that area, Butler County, which one might think is more Republican, voted for this measure. So this is a topic that really cuts across the political spectrum.
Terry, how does Bernie Moreno win on this issue? If he does not stick to his original thing where he's opposed to abortion, and actually with no exceptions, to now, you know, he's up to where they let the states decide. He was for a 15-week ban. How does he navigate these waters? Because the right side's going to be mad at him, or the left side's going to be mad at him, and people in the middle might be mad at him as well.
Well, I'm surprising you occasionally politicians, whether it's fracking or abortion, change positions. The truth of the matter is, from all the polling I've seen in Ohio, which is limited, abortion is still an issue, but it's not the issue. Obviously, the Democrats would rather talk about abortion than some other issues, and clearly many women legitimately feel insulted by what he said. But my guess is by next week we'll be on to some other issues because everything is changing so fast. So clearly, candidates ought to learn not to joke, bad jokes or even worse jokes. You ought to stick to the issues and the issues that are working for your side, not going off on tangents.
Yeah, there are cameras everywhere, as many a politician has now learned. But Sam, this also comes as the ads have now turned. I've seen a couple of anti-Moreno ads highlighting his abortion stance and his changing positions on abortion.
I think, first, I'll agree with Terry. Cameras are everywhere, so you don't make stupid statements. And two, I was waiting for this issue to rise to the surface. Now, on the issue of what's the number one issue, every year economics is the number one issue. What's important is the top three, top five. And in the top five, type three, whatever you, abortion is there. So it is among the most important issues. What I was surprised at is lack of discipline. And I thought this guy was like a robot, but he's not. He gets off script and he goes places he shouldn't go. This could be very critical for him.
He's a fairly rookie candidate. I mean, this was really his first big election. He won the primary, of course, and he toyed with the idea of running a few years ago, but now this is his first big campaign.
Right, it is, and I mean, he's done rallies with Donald Trump, in the past, but he is really doing more of these style of events, to my knowledge, which are these smaller sort of fundraising, preach to the choir type things, and I think that he does try to do it in jest or to make himself seem, very like lighthearted and personable. But this one kind of he put his foot in his mouth.
Yeah. Do you think these candidates will debate? I've heard nothing about a possible debate. I know some organizations have proposed a debate between these two candidates, but nothing has.
I think both sides are working on firing up their bases. And interestingly, because somebody sent me mail, was targeted to Republicans from Sherrod Brown, trying to emphasize how he votes with Trump on things. So clearly there's a battle of how much do you put into the base, how much do you put into persuasion. So there's different battles going on. And of course, without a presidential campaign going on in Ohio, there's more of a burden on Sherrod's people. How do you turn out your base? How does he get ticket splitters?
I think he just may have given them what they needed in order to turn the people out. I think there's another issue here. Sherrod is leading. Why a debate?
Well, I'm not sure Sherrod's leading because there's been some recent polling, but that's flawed polling with too much of a sample. But I think right now the polling in this race is almost jump ball. But NBC News, Henry Gomez had a very good story on how much more for the final 6 weeks is on the air for Bernie versus what's on for Sherrod. And strategically, there's this big question, did Sherrod spend too many tens of millions in the spring and summer with fluff ads when maybe he should have targeted the money in the last month and a half?
There's one aspect of polling that people always amaze me. There are indexes in polling. And the one indicator that I always use is a preference or a like down in further in the poll itself. And the preference in most of the polls that I've seen like Sherrod. All of the polls, the preferences show that they like Sherrod. Don't tell me about the numbers, but people like Sherrod versus the other candidate.
That might have been a few years back, but I think when you look at the polling today, both the candidates are probably upside down, and it's similar for the people running for president.
Yeah.
Well, and we're seeing some really heavy attacks on Sherrod. A lot of, as Terry says, I've seen one where, they're basically talking about, boy, I used to really like Sherrod, but, he supports allowing transgender, women to play sports or whatever, and they're really aiming in on getting that voter who has supported him over time and might be an independent or Republican.
The whole message that he's too liberal for Ohio, even though we've seen him for 18 years, so we'll see. Usually, vice presidential debates pale in comparison to the presidential debates, but this year, with only one debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, Tuesday's debate between Tim Walz and J.D. Vance takes on added importance. Then you add in the controversy surrounding the Vance campaign, and the event becomes even more compelling. For the past couple of weeks, Vance has come under fire for spreading false rumors about Springfield. This week, an old recording has him pointing to a study that says car seat regulations have driven down the number of babies born in this country by more than 100,000. Terry Casey, the study is from a University of Washington and a Boston College business professors, a team. They said that the cost of the third car seat is why we've seen a population decline. Seems a bit of a stretch, but my question to you is, Where does he come up with this stuff?
Well, sometimes these professors do all kind of studies, and when you start quoting them, you get in trouble. But the big thing is Tuesday is going to be the debate, and the contrast between the Minnesota governor and Vance is going to be fascinating, because let me make a prediction. Vance will not miss opportunities to go after the opponent, or he won't take the bait on silly things as Harris did on Trump. So definitely Vance is going to do better than Trump. And remember, unlike me, he was a summa cum laude graduate of Ohio State. So he's clearly got more debate savvy, and I think you'll see that. But in the ultimate analysis, it's going to be about Trump versus Harris. The VPs are nice, but that's secondary.
But do you think it's as secondary, Sam, as it was like when Mike Pence and Kamala Harris debated? Because Trump and Biden had debated twice. They were supposed to debate a third time. They didn't make it. But at least they had debated twice. That was the main event. The vice presidential debate was kind of, we remember it for the fly. That's really the only thing we remember it about.
Mike, I disagree, and I think Kamala Harris is a good example. The vice president became important this time because the president stepped down. I think it's reminding a lot of people that if something happens to the president, what are the capabilities of the vice president? In this case, we had a very capable person, but what are the capabilities of the other candidates with regards to leadership? I think they're quite questionable. You could ask that question. And I think it's going to be more important than it has been in the past because of the dynamics of the situation.
It comes down to likability. Sam was talking about the likability of Sherrod Brown, and I think that the polls have shown, Jesse, that people just kind of like Tim Walz, the first impressions of him, more than they like J.D. Vance, because J.D. Vance has been pretty aggressive on the campaign trail and doing many interviews. So the likability is going to be something we measure on Tuesday.
Yeah, I think this is an opportunity for J.D. Vance to introduce himself to the nation, because he's not a person who's been a national figure in politics, and honestly hasn't even really been an Ohio figure in politics until recently. He won the race in 2022 against Tim Ryan and really has had a couple of debates so far in his political career. So this is an opportunity for people who've maybe only heard about him through a meme or a GIF or so forth to get to know the Ohio senator.
Julie, what are you looking for? How much of this debate is going to focus on the dogs and the cats in Springfield and the childless cat ladies and that kind of stuff?
I kind of agree with Sam. I think that this is going to be more important than it usually is, partly because this is such a truncated race, partly because both of these vice presidential nominees were chosen to go after this blue wall. You know, the Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan voters who want sort of this middle America, down-to-earth person who can speak their language. I mean, in both cases, that's sort of what they offer to the ticket. And so I just think that it's going to be really important which one comes off as most authentic, maybe most honest and relaxed. And I think that J.D. Vance is well known for being quite smart, articulate, kind of unflappable in these kind of situations, public and private. That's sort of his reputation, people have told me.
And people forget Pennsylvania is still the pivot state that's probably going to decide the election. And if she had picked Shapiro, the governor there, I think the race might be over by now. But Shapiro's not on the ticket. Pennsylvania is probably going to decide it. And by the way, as a prediction for Saturday night to plug, Saturday Night Live will be back for the first time. And they've had a whole summer and early fall worth of material. How do they pack it all in 90 minutes?
It'll just be a presidential show. But Terry, is J.D. Vance trying to win over undecideds, or is he trying to mobilize his base in this debate?
Probably a little of both. I think people will see, as he exhibited in the debates in 2022, both in the primary and the fall, that he is capable and has got some depth and detail. And I'm not sure they'll dig into the other issues that much. And Walz is such a different personality than, say, Shapiro.
And I think those things will be important. I agree. More important during this candidacy and this campaign. Caustic personalities don't do well. We have a coach and a girl who worked at McDonald's. We got it. And a senator and a businessman who are very caustic. They turn you off. You have to force yourself to like them. When you meet them, they're not a type of personalities you like. And I'm telling you, that's going to win.
Well, we'll see what happens Tuesday night. It'll be key.
Things appear to be quieting down in Springfield. The rhetoric has certainly died down. Bomb threats have stopped. 6 Republican congressmen from Ohio have asked for emergency federal funds to help the city cope with the stress the immigrant population has put on police, schools, and the healthcare system. This week, Governor DeWine set up a mobile health clinic. The goal is to reduce wait times for basic medical services like vaccinations and blood pressure screenings. The state and the county is planned to establish a more permanent health clinic in Springfield in the not too distant future. Jessie Balmert, say what you will about the cats and the dogs. It's prompted action down there. I mean, we're all paying attention, and the lawmakers and policymakers are paying attention.
Yeah, it's one of those things. The response like the health clinic or the funding, I think one wishes those could have come without what happened to Springfield, which was threats from overseas. There was a tremendous amount of attention, a tremendous amount of negative attention on the city of Springfield, which I think by all accounts did have issues with the rising population. And these are maybe some of the answers to those problems, but did we have to get there in such a nasty way?
Do you think we could have gotten there without this? Because the mayor and the local officials had been asking for help. The media had done some reporting on it in this spring and summer, but it wasn't until this blew up that Mike DeWine was out there all of a sudden.
Well, he's been there a while because, as he did the New York Times, he's almost grown up in Springfield. But it's a sad thing that it's sometimes, unless you get some media attention, people ignore problems. But let me give you a little prediction. Trump will not be in Springfield and visiting between now and Election Day. In part, per my impeccable source, everything is booked up that could be a site. Somebody was smart to make sure if somebody calls and says we want to come in, there's no place available in Springfield.
So when did those bookings take place? The last couple of weeks?
They've happened, but there's some smart people in Springfield who knew we've got enough attention. And I think in general, good or bad, the media's moved on.
I just would need to make a point on this that's been, kind of nagging at me, but, media attention didn't need to happen in this case to get action. J.D. Vance himself was well aware. He was testifying on Capitol Hill about this. The local representatives in Congress were well aware. Governor DeWine was well aware. What the media attention is for is to elect Donald Trump and J.D. Vance to office. It is not about action. I mean, the action was already happening. DeWine in his first news conference said, over the last year, I've sent this. I'm going to send some more. And so they're getting attention for what they're doing, but
that $2.5 million check came in after the thing blew up, though. The big check that DeWine sent.
Right. To calm things down.
Yeah.
There's no adage from people in social work. I don't care how you got the money. You got the money. This was a double-edged sword. It brought bad recognition to the city, but if it brought stuff that helped solve the problem, then I'm okay with it. This is another example, though, of this caustic personalities and how they are distinctly different from WOS and Kamala. These are nice, upbeat people. These people hate things, hate people, drag things down, make things toxic. That's the difference in this election.
Are there any other cities in Ohio where immigrant populations have really sort of grown?
We've heard that the Haitians moved kind of on up the road because it is very crowded in Springfield now, so Findlay, Lima, and they're right sort of at the beginning of where Springfield was, a couple of years ago, trying to deal with that.
And something popped up today in Sidney, which is Shelby County in the western part, that's got a lot of manufacturing. So these issues are around, and the question is, what responsibility does the federal government have to do more to help out and the communities deal with these challenges?
Haitians are filling jobs that have been going unfilled, other immigrants as well. Where are the private companies in all this? Should it always be a government issue to help with housing and health care?
They take the employees. They're not going to say anything publicly on one side or the other. They look forward to these types of employees. Answering the question, though, there's a Spanish-speaking large population in Toledo, and the Haitians have moved up towards Michigan along that same route. If you go to Ann Arbor now, you will see more ethnic groups inside Michigan. Ann Arbor, the city itself. So those groups are moving up. like the migration from the South of African Americans. We move where the jobs are. So that's not unusual.
Okay. Our last topic, the Issue 1 advertising battle has begun, and supporters of the redistricting amendment have a clear advantage. The group Citizens, Not Politicians has booked $19 million worth of TV ads. Those ads started running this week. Opponents to Issue 1, a group called Ohio U.S, says it has booked up to $2 million worth of ad time. Sam Gresham, we've got 6 weeks. The ads just started recently. Do you have enough time to eliminate confusion on this issue, which confusion can often lead to a no vote in November?
I think there are a group of what I would identify as liberal issues that are crowding the ballot out. And I think there's a wave that comes with that. When those things dominate the ballot, people tend to gravitate to those things and do them as a group. Yes, we're going to pass Issue 1. Why? Because the last 2 votes on the subject, we had a 70% plurality or better. Now, we may not get to 70% plurality, but if you look at our ads and what our ads purport to say versus the opponent's ads and what they purport to say, again, it's toxic.
Well, one of the opponent's ad says that this plan would do away with the plan that was approved by 70% of the vote.
That's a lie. And everybody knows it who has some knowledge. I've seen that people on television say things that are absolute lies. Now, that's one thing that bothers me about this generation of politicians. And the public lets them get away with it.
But Sam, you ought to read the thing that was passed twice by Ohio voters, 70% plus, makes a priority on keeping counties and communities whole. And this new plan is similar to what they did in Michigan. And Sam, the African American community got screwed up there in terms of loss of seats. Right now in Congress, 3 of the 15, 20% are African American females. That's going to change if what happens in Michigan occurs.
But see, this is a part of the gobbledygook that people put out to try and confuse people.
But it happened in Michigan that way.
No, it won't. That doesn't mean it's going to happen in Ohio.
How do we know?
I'm not sure it happened in Michigan that way. You say it happened in Michigan that way. The people I talked to in Detroit and Wayne County, that's not what they tell me.
Well, they had to go to court because there were no African American members of Congress representing Detroit.
So, Jessie, how are you looking at this race? Because it's a very crowded ballot. Donald Trump has a clear advantage in this state. He just might carry Bernie Moreno to victory. Does he hurt the chances of the yes side on this, or will there be more ballot splitters on this case, do you think?
I do believe that is the hope of the Republicans, the Ohio Republican Party, and then the No campaign on this. If you look at their ad, it features Joe Biden, it features Kamala Harris. So they're really trying to make this a partisan issue versus the proponents are trying to say this is nonpartisan, this is good government. And so which issue will kind of win the day? At its base, if you vote yes on one, it's replacing the current system with a 15-member citizen commission to draw legislative and congressional maps. If you vote no, you're keeping our current system, which is a 7-member commission of politicians, or sometimes it starts with the lawmakers. That's the difference.
Sam Gresham is on one yes ad aimed at African American voters.
He does a great job in the ad.
Yes, he does.
Thank you.
You'll have to find it on your own. But the other ad, Julie, starts with a farmer who says he's a conservative. Then it has a African American guy who says he's independent, and this older woman who is a liberal. And they all say that we need to change the system.
Right, and that is a reflection of what we heard when they launched the campaign, Citizens Not Politicians, was high-profile figures, former Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, who's Republican, Yvette McGee-Brown is Democrat, and that their whole coalition is not partisan or is bipartisan. And so I just think that the effort there is to say, and it could depend on how people feel about Sherrod Brown, whether they come out, those people who are in the middle. And I just don't think anyone's going to be, or people are going to be less likely voting this straight ticket this year because it's kind of a confusing ballot.
All right, let's get to our final off-the-record parting shots. Sam Gresham, you're up first.
I think this election, unfortunately, is a very important election. And I think the point that you made, the values situation, telling the truth, I hope after this election becomes a topic that we sit down and have a discussion about.
Terry.
This week, STRS, the teachers' retirement thing, took several puzzling twists, including staff leaving, a $2 million payout to an executive director they kind of fired, but then they wanted his silence. There's going to be a lot more to come, and sadly, for everybody, not just teachers, but other public employees, there's a lot of questions that ultimately have to be solved by the General Assembly.
Okay. Julie.
I'll just take the opportunity to plug a story that should be of mine that we'll be publishing shortly, but it gets into all the various definitions of gerrymandering that have come up over the course of this. So I even got a chance to interview the Oxford English Dictionary, which was like my career high point.
Jessie.
This weekend is homecoming for Ohio University, and I will be joining the alumni marching band and hopefully not straining or spraining anything prior to Election Day.
As that band is often in jeopardy of doing. Anyway, former Ohio Supreme Court Justice Herb Brown celebrates his 93rd birthday on Friday. Justice Brown left the court at the end of 1992 to focus on writing, and he's still writing. He has just published his third novel, Darkness Lies in Wait, inspired by a death penalty case he heard while on the bench. He's also written 7 plays. He says writing keeps him going, but who knows for how long, he says. Hopefully for a while longer. Happy birthday, Justice Brown. That is Columbus on the Record for this week. Continue the conversation on Facebook. We'll put Julie's article there. You can also watch us anytime at our website, wosu.org/COTR, on YouTube and the PBS video app. For our crew and for our panel, I'm Mike Thompson. Have a good week.